You're listening to today's inspirational message on the Proverbs with Kurt Bjorklund.
So Proverbs 8 is a call to wisdom, and there's something we must learn, which is how to have prudence. And then in verses 12 through 21, I'm going to say that there's something that we must hate. It starts in verse 12 by saying, I, wisdom, dwell with prudence, and I find knowledge and discretion. So again, painting this picture about wisdom. And then the fear of the Lord is the hatred of evil. Now, here we return to the theme that started very early in Proverbs chapter 1, which is the idea of the fear of the Lord. And it hasn't been mentioned for a while, but what's significant here is it says the fear of the Lord is to hate evil. And there's some nuance here because so often what happens for me, for you, is that when we think of hating evil, we think about hating evil in other people. But notice what comes next. Pride and arrogance and the way of evil and perverted speech I hate. So pride here is a word that's only used here in all of the Old Testament, whereas arrogance is used more often and has the idea of splendor. And so pride and arrogance, so he's probably narrowing into something very specific and something very general. Pride here probably has the connotation of saying you are puffed up over something very particular, whereas arrogance is you're borrowing worth from other things. And it's interesting that he calls this something that he hates, because we don't tend to think of pride or borrowing worth as being that negative. But if you think about it, one of the reasons this probably is something God hates is because it takes glory from God and we start finding our worth, our value in things other than in God and Jesus Christ, because we say, I'm proud because of what I've achieved. I'm proud because of my relationships. I'm puffed up because of my associations. And then he says the way of evil. So he says here, the hatred of evil, the way of evil. And the word that's used for evil is the most basic word for bad, which is often translated evil. But this is a blanket statement of saying that there's something in us that should have a sense that God has a good, better way of doing things than we often have. And so often we don't love it because our pride and arrogance says, I want my way, I want my glory, rather than saying what is revealed in the Word of God that shows what is indeed glorious, what is indeed right. And then he talks about speech, perverted speech, he says, I hate. And perverted speech means something that is twisted, something that takes truth and leads it in a different direction than what it is supposed to be. So he hates when we puff ourselves up, when we don't appreciate his glory and splendor, and when we twist words. And then he says, I have counsel and sound wisdom. I have insight. I have strength. By me, kings reign and rulers decree what is just. By me, princes rule and nobles, all who govern justly. So wisdom, saying I'm not part of what God hates, leads to great leadership in civil organizations, or really in any organization, civil context, any organization. So this is an interesting piece, because would you say that politicians in our country generally display a lack of pride, lack of arrogance, a hatred of the way of evil, and speech that isn't perverted? Really, whatever party you're part of, it doesn't sound like much of a description. And so he's saying here, this is, now there are politicians, by the way, who are those things. And that is a beautiful thing. And he's saying when that happens, they'll govern justly, and that is good. And he says, I love those who love me, and those who seek me diligently find me. And then this great promise, riches and honor are with me, enduring wealth and righteousness. My fruit is better than gold, even fine gold, and my yield than the choice silver. I walk in the way of righteousness and the paths of justice, granting an inheritance to those that love me and filling their treasuries. So justice and righteousness are part of the reality of hating evil. And loving justice is an indicator that there's something in us that has said, I don't like or I hate what is evil. So there's something to learn, prudence, and there's something to hate, the way of evil. And that is part of how we find wisdom.
Thanks for joining us here today. There's a lot of great content to explore on Orchard Hill Plus and on the Orchard Hill main feed from the weekend. Have a great day.